Welcome to The Difference. Today we ask the question, what does it look like to be on a journey to becoming something different? Join us today.
You are listening to The Difference, a presentation of The Hour, a 54-year ministry providing hope and encouragement and good news, first on radio, then on television, now streaming online at Our Stream, which is located at thehour.org. And now, Steve, here we are, back doing radio and audio again on The Difference podcast. Here's your host and my great friend, Steve Castillo.
Thanks, Anthony. You know, I just have to say, you and I have done this ministry for a long time, and I don't think I've had as much fun as we're having just sitting here doing this podcast.
It's sort of like what we were talking about in our last program with, it's like we're pausing and having a conversation, and I'm feeling the same way. We filmed and, hey, that was good, and we do this message, but sometimes that was talking to people. It's right. Different. Now we're having a conversation, and it is refreshing. Not that I didn't like all those years that we did all these other venues, and that's some good stuff, and God used that. But this is just fun.
And I think that's going to be where we go today. You know, last week we talked about the idea of kind of our call as a journey into becoming different. And one of the things that I've discovered in the midst of this is we never are on the journey alone. That God is always kind of weaving us together in relationships so that we have journey partners, people to go on our journey to become different. And one of the gifts that I guess has probably blessed me as much or more than any gift in my ministry are the experiences where I've had those moments where all of a sudden you kind of catch a glimpse of this bigger picture that you're in that you never knew you were there. That, you know, it's kind of like in your filming thing, you have character development, but then you have this storyline that where your characters converge and their individual
right.
actions and interactions begin to create a story that they by themselves couldn't create.
Well, it's the beautiful thing about doing documentary filmmaking. You are learning and you're discovering. You're not really the author of it. Yes, you choose what storylines to follow, but that's the exciting part of it. With Walter Anderson, John Anderson, he was the first interview I did. Interviewed him for 3 hours, wore him out. In the middle of it, he tells this story about being under the pier and hearing his father come in and hearing these two gentlemen talking about his father and saying, you know, he got snake bit and a miracle happened. The snake lived, you know, and having this conversation. But the way he told that story, it was the first part I edited. I took that 4 minutes or 5 minutes that it took for John to tell the story. I edited it down a little, but that editing of that was the emotional crux and the tone I wanted to have the whole film. Every other interview I went to, I showed them that clip. This is what I'm going for. And so it set the tone. With Eudora, I remember pumping gas. So we just have finished a documentary on Eudora Welty, and I'm pumping gas at the gas station while we're working on this. My wife had been at home, Amy, she's so wonderful. She was doing research, and it pays to marry an English teacher if you're doing a film about a writer. And Amy said, I was doing research and I found this story about Eudora, and she wrote one children's story. It's called The Shoe Bird. And in that story, the birds hear that shoes are for the birds, a little boy says. So the birds all say, oh, shoes are for the birds. So all the birds come to get shoes. The dodo makes an appearance. Here's this extinct bird, and they're like, you came this long, long way. Did you come for shoes? And the dodo says, no, I came to be loved and remembered. And what's significant about this is Eudora's young nieces could not pronounce when they were young Eudora. They called her Dodo.
Oh, wow.
So in a sense, she wrote herself into this story as the dodo and being loved and remembered. And that's what Eudora was all about, family and connection and relationships. my wife was telling me this and saying, listen at this transcript of an interview I heard with Mary Alice telling this. Mary Alice being the niece. And I'm at the gas pump. I'm almost breaking into tears. I'm like, that's my crux right there. That's the heart of the story. It's the first thing we edited. It informed everything else we did. I think in our walks and our paths, if we find that source of inspiration, and some people it may be tailgating and following Mississippi State baseball, or some people it may be going to film festivals or whatever. If we find that thread that delights us and excites us, there are ways that can wind up being a source of inspiration and a source of encouragement for other people, a way we can connect with others in a real way.
I think that's beautiful, because as we began, we're not on this journey alone, and it's almost like in elementary school, especially in preschool, you'll find a lot of times when a teacher is starting school, they'll have a little string or a rope for all the kids to grab a hold of, so that wherever the teacher leads them, they stay together and learn to be in a line. And it's not like God's trying to get us in a line, but those clarity moments mean, oh, look at this rope we're heading. I'm beginning to see.
I'm connected.
I'm not only connected, but I think we're headed someplace. As you were talking, I thought of a story when I was at St. Matthew's. Rayford Woodrick, who is one of my heroes. Rayford was one of the characters of
tuba
of the
player.
Minister, tuba player.
My son played with him in the symphonic orchestra in Jackson and loved Rayford.
And so when I went there, he was retired and needed a place to be, and so we hired him as our director of missions.
Oh, wow.
And so we were having he had pulled the missions team together, and we were sitting in a room, and he said, look, this is what I want. We're not just going to randomly pick something out. I want you to spend several weeks praying about what we need to do as a missions team. I want you to get out in the community. I want you to ask people questions. Where is it we need to be? And when we come back, we'll let God help us discern that. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? And so, sure enough, everybody came out, and we had the convened meeting, and I couldn't wait to see what happened. So we're sitting in this circle, and people begin to say, well, I went out and I talked to so-and-so and talked to a police officer, and they said this and this, but the one thing that they said was, don't go to Sawmill in Canton. That's a terrible place. Next person. Well, it's funny you said that. I was talking to so-and-so and so-and-so, and when they finished, they said, don't go to Sawmill. In a circle of about 12 people, 5 of the 12 said, don't go to Sawmill. And so after about the 5th one, Rayford said, do y'all catch a theme here? What do you think? And everybody said, we need to go to Sawmill. And so we loaded up and went to the community. And Sawmill in Canton, it has one way in and one way out. And it was an old sawmill community. It was very blighted. Every other house was a crack house or different things. And there was one little United Methodist church and a Baptist church right in the middle of it. But everybody that was a member drove in. And so we said, we're going to go and take a survey of the community. So we lined up, all white people going into an African-American community, knocked on the first door, and in about 15 seconds, the door flew open, and there's this little sassy 11-year-old girl says, what are y'all doing in my neighborhood? And I said, we're here from the church just seeing if there's any need. And she said, y'all got no business being here. You're going to get hurt or in trouble. I said, well, we're going to try to meet people in the neighborhood. She said, well, you're certainly not going by yourself. Let me go. And she hollered back into the house, and there was 5 or 6 little kids younger than her that she was babysitting that came, and she said, I'll take you through the neighborhood and tell you who to talk to. So for the next 45 minutes, this young lady took us and gave us a tour of her neighborhood, and we went in, and she would say, nope, you don't need to go there. We got back to the church. And we were sitting there laughing, and we had stopped at this little store and got them some little snacks. And about the time we got back to the church, this green, jacked up, big-wheeled car pulls up, tinted glass, and the window goes down. He said, hey. So I walked over the window. He said, what y'all doing here? And I said, well, we're here from St. Matthew's United Methodist Church, and we're here to kind of see what we can do to help the community. And he said, then you'll be safe. I'll take care of that. And the window went up and he left. And so we finished, and Rayford said, well, surely this is what we need to do. So we went back to the church. At the same week, we were having coffee with the pastor, which was a welcoming of new members and people interested in joining the church. And all the staff was in the meeting, and we had gone around, and each of the people who were waiting to join introduced themselves. And we came to this young couple who none of us had met before, and she was the spokesperson. She said, we're moving from across the reservoir, and I'm just lost because I have really been wrestling with what I'm going to do with my time. Now, before I go any further, at the end of the meeting, Rayford had said, I think we're going to Sawmill. Who wants to lead this mission? Crickets. He said, well, then I want you to pray about that. Back to the meeting. The woman says, I've just lost my favorite ministry called Bread for Life. I go out in the community and we feed, and I just miss being on the front line of serving. And Rayford said, this is where you belong? Let me tell you about Sawmill.
Wow.
So the woman headed up that ministry, but that wasn't the end of it. From there, she got a call to go to another ministry, and right now, she is on the governor's task force coordinating human trafficking and his task force of doing that.
How about
all
that?
Because of the call that went through Sawmill. And I say all that to say that God's vision and holding on to this string and going through things together. None of us would have gotten there without Raver having the prayer. None of us would have gotten there without us going out and talking to the community. None of us would have gotten there without having that coffee with the pastor and this woman lamenting about what was happening. And it was one of those moments while you're sitting here and you just kind of Rayford and I looked at each other and was like, wow.
That's incredible. Well, and the thing with the analogy with the string and holding on, grabbing onto something that has movement, grabbing onto something that is in going in a direction. There's power in that.
And following somebody you trust.
Oh my gosh, yes. And that's what we should be, and even Rayford trusting him, but he didn't know where all that was going to lead.
No.
He just started a conversation. And that's that possibility thinking. I've talked before about giving our children possibility thinking. Of course you can write a novel. Of course you can do this, because that's the way my mind has always worked. My dad was a football coach. He didn't say, Anthony, you can publish a little magazine when you're 12 and 13. But something just told me, well, of course I can. So I did, and I would copy it on my aunt's copier machine, and I had subscribers from 12 different states when I stopped doing my little magazine, and I didn't have, but something was speaking into me that, of course you can do that. Why not? And I think just having someone that you trust or someone that you can look up to, I think it's just possibility thinking. My daughter, I don't know that I ever had to really tell my daughter, you can write a novel. She saw me writing books and publishing, and so she just assumed, well, of course I can, and I want to do it younger than you did. And my son, well, Daddy, I can't write I can't write music for a film. Well, of course you can. I think that possibility thinking, which does come from somebody that you trust or you admire or look up to, and we don't know who all is looking up to us. And that's why it's important for us to be okay and to be right. And it makes me think, we were talking last week about sometimes having to just be still, regain your composure, or just in the busyness, hey, I'm doing all this stuff for God. Well, why don't you let God kind of direct you with instead of you kind of directing God? And sometimes our busyness, we get in the director mode instead of the follower mode. And there's Seth Green, who did the books Purple Cow and things.
Seth Godin.
Seth Godin. And so in this one of the books, he's talking about grazing. And if you spend all your time giving milk, a cow can't just give milk 24/7 every day, day after day. A cow has to then go into the field and graze and in the sunshine and eat the grass and wade out and marinate in the water and all of this. And like one of Wyatt's paintings, marinated beef with the cows out there in the water. But that grazing time, that's where so many times, yes, God has that thundering, powerful voice that moves mountains, the burning bush, but sometimes it's that still small voice speaking in gentle, quiet sounds. And then we have this piece about a decision or a direction. And if we're always trying to produce milk and not taking the time to replenish ourselves, then we are robbing people of maybe what an inspiration we can be ourselves sometimes.
You know, you led me to another facet of the story I was telling. One of the things we
that
did
was my
at
plan.
Sawmill, you are so gifted. We would cook hamburgers and hot dogs every time we'd go to Sawmill. And we had a tennis pro that came out and taught tennis. There was a little parking lot there. We had games for the kids. It was nothing about preaching to them. It was just providing a safe place for them to be and showing the community that we were good. And the woman who was coordinating the ministry, that was our new member, had a little daughter who came with her every time. And I think she was probably 6 or 7, if she was that old. And so we would pull in, and she was always driving a van and brought several people with her. She would open the door, and her little girl would tear out. And one of the little girls that we met on that first cycle, and she became really good friends. And so one day we were serving the hot dogs, and we came back, and Ashley looked down at her daughter's feet and said, "Where are your shoes?" And she looked at her, never batted an eye, and said, "Mama." And she called the little girl by name. She didn't have matching shoes, and I have a bunch, so I just gave her mine.
Oh, wow.
And by the way, Mama, can she come spend the night with us? And of course, Ashley backed up, and she was like, she told me later, she said, "I was just thinking, oh dear Lord, what have I done?" And so she very graciously said, "Oh, that was sweet of you." But you know what else she did? She took the little girl and walked with her to her house and asked her mom if she could come spend the night at their house.
That's incredible.
And over the time, that young daughter has grown into a leader and a kind-hearted person. And what happened was, is in this midst of all of us holding the string to go different places, everybody that came with us found a beautiful banquet table that God had prepared. The little girl that got the shoes, the daughter that gave them, all of us that watched it happen.
Right.
There's this kind of cinematic thing that happens as a story unfolds, and as God has led us to these places that you just go, this is abundant life. This is what we're here for. This is what the second chapter of Acts looked like. And in our next episode, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I was just so thankful to just kind of, it was almost like a drone kind of panning out and shooting this bigger picture than we could see. And it's like you were kind of getting God's eye view of this. And I just know God was smiling bigger than we could imagine.
And you know, last program we ended by saying some of you listening may not be able to have the same realizations, or say, I'm not in the same place that these guys are, and I haven't seen some of those moments. And that's okay. I mean, part of the analogy of the string, though, and the teacher holding the rope and a trusted person leading the way, not every student hanging on to that string is excited about where they're going. Not everyone is wanting to walk in a straight line. Not everyone is wanting to participate. Sometimes when there's nothing, you're empty, you're tired, you're exhausted, you're depleted. There's nothing left. Sometimes all you can do is just hold on to the string and trust. Make sure that you're in the right group, you're in the right line, you've got the right people around you, and then you will still be heading in the right direction, because you are going to get a second wind. But if you are holding on to that rope, you are holding on to that line and going in that direction with trusted people or the right crowd that you're hanging with, you're going to get to someplace good.
Well, and the scripture uses the words bearing witness. And it's this thing that if you're with the group, you get to see what they see.
Yeah.
And sometimes just watching and being able to go, whoa, look at that. That's real. That's authentic. That's different. Then it begins to do its work on you. Even if you weren't a part of the storyline, you become part of the crowd that watched as the friends brought the paralyzed man in on the pallet and Jesus healed him.
Exactly. And again, we learn by watching. Not all life lessons. That's what movies are wonderful for. That's what sermon illustrations. That's what novels, songs. We learn and have this shared human experience, and we can learn from others. So sometimes, if you are depleted, if you are listening and saying, I'm not inspired at all right now, maybe it's like Rayford going around the room and saying, let's hear from others. And then we will identify something that ignites us, something that, but you have to be looking with the right people. You have to be looking in the right direction. And I had someone who told me years ago, she was lamenting that she couldn't find the right kind of guy to date. And I had to I said, you're looking in the wrong places. You're frequenting establishments in all the wrong way. And then I sang a little song, and it was and it did not go over well. But she was. I'm like, maybe you should try these places, or these events, or these types of things, or church, or a bookstore, or something. You're looking in the wrong place, saying that you're looking for one type of person, and I don't think that you're going to find them there. So we have to be intentional about what we're looking for. We have to be intentional about wanting to be different and wanting to have a difference in our life. And I think if that's our heart, if that's our prayer, and we're in a prayerful mindset of that, I think God will honor that and point us in the right direction.
I do. One of my favorite authors is Margaret Wheatley. And one of the first books I read to her, thanks to Bishop Hope Morgan Ward, was Turning to One Another. And the whole book is a book of poetry that is this whole thing. You cannot do life alone. And it's in turning to one another. When Jesus called the disciples, he didn't call one.
That's right.
He didn't call two. He called a family. And so part of the joy of this life, especially in the middle of a world of virtual friendship on Facebook and so forth, find a group and turn toward them. It amplifies your ability to be able to find your way and your identity.
Yeah.
And so our invitation for you today is to begin to think about, what rope do you have a hold of? Who are you making your journey with?
Yes.
Think about the moments when God has led you to places that you were just mesmerized by or overwhelmed by, that you knew you were on holy ground, and celebrate those. And then ask yourself, am I making myself available to be a part of that by journeying together with others?
Absolutely. And see, we're out of time. I mean, but there's going to be more. We've got more things to talk about, and this goes by so quickly. But what a joy it is that you and I have been following this same path together. I appreciate you.
Well, same here, man. And we want to invite you to journey with us. You know, what the cool thing is we learned from the Hour Show is that we had family in people's living room, family we didn't even know we had. Working at the market this week, another person come up and say, "You're a Methodist man." I saw you on the hour. I
Exactly.
knew your face
Yeah.
looks familiar.
How wonderful is that?
Our family has watched you for a long time.
Right.
And so we want to invite you into this family. Journey with us because we're having a lot of fun. And as always, hey, live loved.
You've been listening to The Difference, a presentation of The Hour. The Difference is made in conjunction with and partnership with the Institute for Southern Storytelling at Mississippi College. To find out more about the Institute and ways that we are partnering and mentoring young lives through storytelling, filmmaking, and more, visit us at southernstorytelling.mc.edu. And for more resources from The Hour and from The Difference, check us out at our Hour Stream platform with the streaming content at thehour.org. I'm Anthony Thaxton. Thanks for joining us.